Hello and welcome to the Draft Talk podcast. The Draft Talk podcast bringing you everything you could possibly need as we head towards the draft. We've got mock drafts, interviews, news, scouting reports. We've got the lot, and we're back today, continuing our fantastic top five series. I've got a nice spicy one for you today. But before we dive in, let's do some introductions. I'm your host Brian. We're brought to you by the good folks 99 Yards, and joining us today, as always, our wonderful scouts, Owen, MJ, and Stu. How's it going, guys?
Very well. Edge rusher class that comes round now. Probably quite a lot of names to talk about, I would imagine, amongst us. I don't know if there's going to be a top five that we all agree on. Because for me, again, not spoilers, after number one, there's lots of players with lots of things to like, but no complete package. So could be fun.
Yeah, for me, this is the strongest class in the 2022 draft. A lot of talk about the corners, but for me, it's with the edge. There's 16 guys that I really, really, really like. All, I think, will be top 100 players. So a really, really good class. I'm looking forward to speaking about them.
Yeah, this is going to be really good. This edge class is going to cause some absolute chaos, and I think that's where we'll be today, because there are so many guys to choose from here. Can't wait to see who we've got.
We might surprise ourselves.
After that build-up, we're going to have the same top fives, everyone.
Exactly.
Gotta say, no pressure now, guys, but you've got to really pull out of the bag today. So yeah, bring on the chaos. Yes, we've done the receivers, we've done the running backs, and we've done the defensive tackles. And yet, as we mentioned, we are straight on to the defensive ends. The chaps have done all the scouting and narrowed it down. Top five players in this year's draft class at the defensive end position. We're going to go through them five up to one, with one being the best. Yeah, let's get going, shall we? Let's start off. Who shall we start off? Stu, we'll go to you. Who is your number five?
Number five for me is Lukas Van Ness from Iowa. Van Ness is a guy who's been talked about very highly lately. He seems to have risen up and up and up draft boards. And I see by the reactions on the guys' faces, I'm probably low on Lukas Van Ness, but I might not be. Who knows? They might not have him. He's a guy who was a workout machine at the combine, who did everything and more that was expected. He's a guy who's very strong, really athletic. He's got all the upside. He just looks like a cool pass rusher when you see him as well. You think, yeah, that's a guy I want rushing the passer on my team. Very aggressive, very enthusiastic. Tackles really well, but the guy is very, very raw. He's never been a starter for Iowa. He really lacks that big game experience that some of the other guys are going to have. He doesn't really... I think it's wrong to say he doesn't have a clue what he's doing, but he's just so athletic. He just out-athletes people. And I think that there's a lot that is really much to like. He's this kind of ball of clay that teams can mold into whatever they want him to be. He's played a lot on the inside initially before kind of moving to the outside, so he does have a bit of position flexibility. He's going to go early, but for me, there's better players out there at this moment in time. Whether Van Ness overtakes him, he has the potential to do so. But we've seen it before with potential. It's projection versus what you're seeing now. And Lukas Van Ness is really a projection for me, but he's still good enough to be in that top five.
Yep. So first bit of consensus. I've got Lukas Van Ness at number 5 as well. Absolutely, same as you there, Stu. Absolute raw talent, and it is projection. He's got a lot going for him. He is a new kid on the block. There's so much chatter about him, isn't there? That the league likes this guy. And as soon as mock draft started coming out, he was, squarely in round 1. He's got great balance going into contact. He is about the power, and he can burst through that line. I think he engages really, really well. So I think there's a lot there. It is this raw talent though, and he's always fresh. So it's almost no wonder that his stats are so good, because he's pretty much always fresh. So I did have a quick look at it. Here's your little stat for this episode. So he's played roughly the same number of games as Myles Murphy in the last 2 years. But in only 4 of those games has Lukas Van Ness played more than 40 snaps, whereas Myles Murphy's played over 40 snaps in 20 of those 27 games. So you kind of wonder if some of these other guys had played the same number of snaps that Lukas Van Ness has played, would their stats be better than they are? Would they look better on tape? Because half the time he's sat over there on the bench waiting to get back in. So he is raw, but there's a lot of talent there. And I thought just on his production and just what you can see in terms of what he could be, yeah, he just about got in there at number 5.
I have him at number 4. So I am a little bit higher on Lukas Van Ness, and I think that's simply just because of that upside that you get from him. That he possibly has the highest ceiling, I think I'd be right in saying, of any of these guys, simply because of what he could be. That currently he wins almost exclusively with power, and I dread to think what he will be like once he actually develops a pass rush plan and adds some more versatility to his game, because he is aggressive, he's nasty, he's physical, a pure athlete. He could be anything he wants to be. I think he really is that good. Yes, he's raw. I think he has a higher floor than maybe he's given credit for. But I think if you draft him, you're almost going to have to write off the first half of the season, and you'll see the best of him towards the back end and then into year 2. Not a redshirt year, but you're going to have to give him some time to learn. So if he's not going, I don't think he's going to give you instant production, but I think by the back end of year 1 and definitely in year 2, that's when you're going to start seeing the best of Lukas Van Ness. Just he's an absolute athlete. His power is absolutely dominant. Really high motor as well. Converts power to speed. I really like him.
Good stuff. Carry on, Owen. Give us your number 5 pick then.
Yeah, so at number 5, so a place behind Lukas Van Ness, I had Georgia's Nolan Smith, an absolute elite athlete, I think it's fair to say. Special explosiveness, special athleticism. His burst is absolutely exceptional, and that is what you get with Nolan Smith, because he is an outside rusher who has a lot more power than he's given credit for, is lighter, so that isn't necessarily a problem, but he is a different kind of player to a lot of the guys which we're going to speak about as we move further in. But a player who can do a bit of everything, plays a lot tougher and more physical than this size would suggest, but that athleticism just gives him such a high floor, but it also gives him such a high ceiling because of how he can develop. Tore his pec this past season, so wasn't on the field for as much as we would have liked, but I think he's a player who can do a bit of everything. I think he can affect all 3 downs, because he can even drop into coverage if you wanted him to. He was the leader really on that Georgia defensive line, which I think a lot of teams will put a lot of stock into that out of all those guys, he was the leader, and he just has that natural leadership ability. So I think he's a player who will go in the 20s and will be successful straight away, because just what he has is say exceptional upside and exceptional floor because of his athletic ability.
Okay, I've got Nolan Smith as well, but I've got him higher than that.
Okay.
I've got him in at number 3, and I just loved watching him. Just absolutely loved watching him for all the reasons that you've just mentioned. He just strikes just like a man on a mission. It's just relentless, and the power that comes through for a guy who, as you say, is only in the 230s. He's only playing in the 230s, something like that. His production was great. He was the leader at Georgia, and that has come through. And a number of his teammates have been, tweeting out when he was doing the combine and things like that. And obviously it was a phenomenal defense, and that is an interesting thing, isn't it? All these guys coming out of those Georgia defenses, there's clearly they've had an exceptional couple of years. I do wonder what, again, it comes down to how will he be used by whoever he gets drafted by, because he's definitely in terms of edge, he's out there right on the edge. I mean, he's almost, would fit in as an outside linebacker in a kind of like 3-4 or something, or he'd be coming from as wide as you can get, that kind of wide 9. I thought of places like San Francisco when I was thinking of that. But I loved the ferociousness that he brought, the fact that he is so athletic. I mean, his combine numbers were ridiculous. But even at that size, he is useful in the run game as well. He's not one of these 230-pound edge rushers where, forget it, in the run game, he's not going to give you anything. He attacks the run as well as he attacks the pass. So, yeah, his was a tape I just fell in love with. So he ended up at 3 for me.
What do you think I'm going to say about Nolan Smith? Owen's been looking at me funny this whole time.
You've got that look on your face, and I can't work out whether that means you have him really high or you don't have him at all.
Do you play poker? Because I can't tell either.
Number 2.
Oh, God.
Nolan Smith. I absolutely love Nolan Smith. I think he's an exceptional athlete, but he isn't just an athlete. He has tremendous timing with his hands. He is quick of thought and quick enough to be able to use that swat moves to get offensive linemen so they can't even get their hands on him. And that power is much more than just have enough power to get by with. He is so incredibly strong for a guy of his size that he doesn't just have to line up at that wide 9 and just hair past people around the outside using his bending speed. He's quick enough of thought that he's slippery enough he can get by them with various moves as well. He can set an edge if he has to. It's not his game, but he's good enough to do that as well. He can see run chase after running backs. He can drop into coverage. The leadership and that mentality about him, he's just an ultimate never say die type of player. He just works the whole time. And when you see that type quality of that Georgia type defense they've had over the last couple of years and they all look to rally around Nolan Smith, I think that tells you something about what kind of player he could be at the next level. He is on the smaller side, but I actually don't care.
What this means then really is after that build up and that intro, we're almost going to have exactly the same guys, just all in different orders, aren't we?
Yep.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah. So let's pick MJ. Give us your number 4, and we'll work out who.
I was just going to say, I'm glad you're keeping us in order here, Brian, because I'm lost as to who said what numbers already. I've got no idea. Okay, so number 4 for me is Myles Murphy from Clemson, and I think it's kind of all there for him. But I struggled with where to put Myles Murphy, because all the traits are there, the power is there. He's got the ideal kind of size and frame. He moves well, but his production hasn't really made the leap. His production was better when he first came in a couple of years ago than it was more recently. It's there in flashes. I mean, he got 6 sacks, but that was 6 sacks across 4 games, and I kind of thought that in the end it was a little bit streaky as to whether he was on it or not. But the traits are there. The footballing IQ is there. He's training to be an architect as well for after he finishes the NFL. So he's definitely up there in terms of he's got the footballing IQ as well. And I think everything is there. I just couldn't get him any higher than 4, because when I looked at the other guys, I just thought that their production coming out of college stacked up better than for Myles Murphy.
I do have Myles Murphy in my top 5, but I've got him at 3. I think he's almost been like the defensive end version of his teammate Brian Brzee. And has there been some prospect fatigue with Myles Murphy? He was talked of pick 5 for a while, and he's dropped down boards. I think he's a really clever pass rusher. He has someone who does have a lot of pass rush moves. He can counter counters. He's got size, length, hand power. He's very quick off the snap. He is that kind of bigger edge. He's maybe not the bendiest player. He's not going to be lining up at your wide 9-7s. He is going to be that kind of 5 to 3 kind of area that he's going to win in. He's maybe not the best mover laterally, but I still think he has all the talent in the world. He's only going to be just 21 when he enters the league, so he's still very young. He's shown year on year that he's learned the position. He's added more to his game each year going on, and I think that there's a lot more to come from Myles Murphy.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say, that I think I'm right in saying that he's the youngest of all these guys. They've literally just turned 21. Do you want to guess where I have him?
I'm lost with what numbers we've got.
Yeah,
left
exactly.
now.
2. Yeah, we're all exactly the same. Just whatever. Just move it down. This is less rankings and more just player discussion at this point. So yeah, I have Myles Murphy at 2. I think he's got a much higher floor than he is given a lot of credit for. I think he's got much more athleticism than he's being given credit for as well. Was on the freaks list. I think he has NFL ready size and length, power, explosiveness. I think that he is just a much better prospect than anyone is kind of giving him credit for at the moment. The where he is being mocked and being placed in mock drafts, to me, is bordering on ridiculous, because he is a really, really, really good player. Scary speed, scary power, has quite a versatile skill set as well. He can do a bit of everything. That Clemson defense is notorious for not being very good for draft prospects, if that's a nice way of saying it. It's not quite NFL friendly, should we say. So what he's been able to do in that team, 18.5 sacks over his 3 seasons there, has been quite impressive, actually. I think he's impressive physically as well. Long arms. I think he's, like Angie said there, he's very intelligent, and that translates onto the field. He reads pre-snap and is very reactive as well. Just his transitions. I really, really like Myles Murphy. I quite happily take him as a top 10 player, 100%.
There we go. So there's just one left on this carnage carousel we're on.
Yeah.
And Stu, give us your number 4. Going back to number 4s. Stu, give us your number 4. We'll see how that goes. Unmute yourself and then give us your number 4.
I was checking you're paying attention. That's going to be, I think, obviously now we've kind of worked it out, it's going to be Tyree Wilson for Texas Tech. Full disclaimer, I'm not a massive Tyree Wilson fan, and he's only on my top 5 because he's going to get drafted highly. I'm not a massive fan of him, and I think for a top 5, if I was going to quote one,
no one's making you put him here. No one's you don't have to.
I would put him in the bin of a top 5 if I'm honest.
That's harsh.
I am not a big Tyree Wilson fan, and I'll hold my hands up if he turns out to be amazing. I didn't see it coming.
This is Greg Rousseau all over again from a couple of years ago, isn't it?
It might
didn't
be.
Like him either.
I did not like Greg Rousseau, and I've probably been found out to be wrong on that one. But hey,
have you fallen a bit of pressure here, putting him in your top 5?
I think it's not peer pressure. I think it's NFL pressure.
Yeah,
because he's going to be dropped. He's going to get drafted like 3rd or 5th or something stupid like that. But he's a definition of what we talked about, a pterodactyl tossed from Mr. Tickle with a massive, big, huge arms. But for me, he's just a big athlete with big arms who doesn't have a great pass rush plan. You guys can talk nicely about Tyree Wilson, but for me, I'm not a massive fan, I must admit. And if I had my time over and it didn't go to peer pressure, I would move Van Ness at 1, and I would actually put BJ Ojolari at 5. So there we go.
I thought you might have done that. I thought BJ Ojolari would have made your twice. I've got Tyree Wilson at 3. Let's see if I can sell you on him a little bit more than
I didn't do a very good job, did I?
No. So 15.5 sacks in his 3 seasons at Texas Tech, and further 1.5 his time at Texas A&M prior to he transferred over. Yes, he is still raw. He doesn't know quite yet how he's best used. He needs someone to come in and kind of teach him, this is what you do best, this is what you should do. But he's going to offer you a nice floor to start with against the run. I think he's very good against the run, and then you can build on that, on what he offers you there, to build out is kind of pass rush. Because what he offers you in terms of his kind of size and his length is an absolute mismatch. He's got power for days, physical traits. The NFL falls in love with physical traits, more than hits all the size measurables, and he is just going to be an absolute terror if he can put it all together. Now, I don't think he's going to be a player that comes in and is going to be giving you double-digit sacks. If that's what you've interpreted from kind of big draft media, I would tone that down just slightly. Kind of the expectations for him in year 1 have slightly gone a little bit out of control, I would say. That let's just remember, he is a project and he is going to need to be coached up. So let that happen, and I think there is a player there. But the NFL falls in love with physical traits, and he's going to go. I don't think he'd make it past 8.
Physical traits went number 1 last year.
Exactly, and that's what he reminds me of. I'll be honest, yeah.
A not so good version.
Yeah, you're bordering on a little bit overhyped at this point.
Yeah. I mean, he was consistently, what was it, Seahawks at 5, wasn't it? He was consistently that to start with. We'll see what happens. I've got him at number 2. I've fallen for those traits. I've fallen for that athleticism. I'm just imagining those long arms giving me a hug. I've fallen for him, Stu, completely. I really liked the explosion that he got off the line. I liked the fact that he likes to cut inside. Actually, he likes to drive the tackle back and then cut inside. He's not really going to come screaming around the edge at you. He is now on the older side. So the caveat here is that if he hasn't got it sorted and he doesn't go to somewhere like Owen said, where they tell him, right, this is what you do, this is what you're best at, then he could have issues because he's on the older side. If you do that comparison with Myles Murphy, where Myles Murphy's got time to develop, Tyree Wilson doesn't really have time to develop as soon as he hits the NFL. He does need to hit the ground running. But I have fallen for that athleticism and that just that long kind of athletic frame. And we know that the NFL loves this sort of player. And he will definitely be going early on day 1. So he was number 2 for me.
Did Owen check with you that he was okay to do stats, MJ? Is that?
Oh, sorry.
I can't look at them all, so I need some help here.
That's good. All right, there we go. Bit of a disagreement, shall we say? But it's good. We've talked it all through. And we can all kiss and make up now. We can all run a big long arm hugs as we move on to the number 1. Stu, I'll let you wax lyrical first. Like you need cheering up after that.
Yeah, I think we've come to the conclusion that MJ goes on stats and I just go on pure feels. Just about a player. Yeah, number 1. I think this is the easiest number 1 we're going to have on any of the position groups that we do.
About the last 3 that we've done.
This is going to be the
John Robinson. You said that about Jalen Carter.
This is easier than both of them. Put it that way. Nobody's going to remember what I said last week, so it's fine. This has been the guy who's been the number 1 for 2 years now at this position. Will Anderson, the edge rusher from Alabama. What can we say about Will Anderson? He has all the traits that you'd want in a pass rusher: production, finishing ability, hand moves. He's powerful. He's fast. He had a slightly better season than the year before in this one. That's not to decry this season whatsoever, but he was phenomenal the year before. I can't say it like Owen couldn't last week. Phenomenal. He's not the biggest pass rusher in the world, but he's got enough size about him. I've seen people want to take Tyree Wilson above him in mock drafts. What are you doing? He just has everything that a pass rusher you could want. And he also, from what you hear about him, he's been a leader in that Alabama team. They've waxed lyrical about his attitude, his effort, his ability on and off the field to be the right kind of character. And yeah, for me, it wasn't close. He's number one in this class.
Yeah, if you picked Will Anderson up and you were to place him in any draft class, he would still be an elite blue chip top 5 player. He is that good. And I think at this point, we're bordering on him becoming overlooked just simply because we've spoken about him for a lot. Everyone's known his name, and his stats have slightly dropped off in 2022 because teams are just putting 4 men on him on every play just so he can't do anything. We also need to remember he's still incredibly young. His name has been out there for a while. He's just been that dominant, but he is still young. Say one of the best players in college football over the last 2 seasons. I think he's a can't miss project. I think he is already elite, dominant. What we were saying about Tyree Wilson before, I think Will Anderson can get over 10 sacks whenever he wants to. He really is that good. I think he's elite in every way. Number 1 overall pick potential, just ticks every box. Versatile, speed, power, athlete, hand movement, placement. He has it all. That just don't overlook Will Anderson. He is the best player in this draft.
He would have been number 1 if he'd come out last year.
Not a question.
Never mind this year. Yeah. That's how good he's been.
Yeah. And we won't extend this podcast too much longer waxing lyrical about him because there's not a lot else to say. I would just add that although he's young, he's averaged just over 700 snaps a season for the last 3 seasons. So he's seen plenty of time on the field. And that's a bit of a contrast between what we were talking about with Lukas Van Ness earlier. He has spent a lot of time on that field. He is easily one of the best edge rushers to come out in the last few years. His production stands up. He ticks all the boxes. And he's another one where, you just, let him loose. His explosion off the line, he is there before you know it. And he will be a frightening prospect coming out if you're up against him next year. So Will Anderson is easily the number 1 edge rusher.
Yeah, team captain as well, which, on a team with so many good players in Alabama, that speaks to something. And not to take on your role here, MJ, but you don't get 34.5 sacks over 3 seasons at Alabama if you are not a blue chip elite prospect.
That's it. You've got to look at the production, haven't you? You've got to look at the production.
Well, there we go. That's our top 5. Only 5 in our top 5. Couple of different orders, you may have noticed. So let's quickly recap. Stu, give us your top 5 again.
And it's again this bloody mutant button. I'm getting worse, not better. Number 5 was Lukas Van Ness. Number 4 was Tyree Wilson. Number 3, Myles Murphy. Number 2, Nolan Smith. And number 1 was Will Anderson.
Lovely stuff, thank you. Owen, yours?
So at number 5, I had Nolan Smith. At 4, I had Lukas Van Ness. At 3, I had Tyree Wilson. At 2, it was Myles Murphy. And 1 was Will Anderson.
And MJ, complete our trio of top 5s, please.
Okay, so 5 was Lukas Van Ness. 4 was Myles Murphy. 3 was Nolan Smith. 2 was Tyree Wilson. And, of course, 1 was Will Anderson.
Lovely stuff. There we go. Bit of a mixed bag, but I'll tell you what, we're going to let you the people decide. Obviously, Will Anderson's number one, but between the other four, Tyree Wilson, Nolan Smith, Myles Murphy, and Lukas Van Ness, we're going to pop a poll on Twitter. Check it out at 99 yards and vote for who you think's the best of the rest, shall we say? And guys, and you mentioned how many 16 or so you could see going top 100. Give us a couple of names for the rest of the class to have a look out for.
Yeah, it's absolutely loaded, this class. My next guy, who is a guy that I really, really like, is Tui Tuipulotu from USC. I would have loved to have fitted him in the top 5, but I just couldn't find a way. But he's a guy who I would look out for in round 2. Keon White, another guy that's been spoken about a lot. Superb athlete, transferring over from Old Dominion to Georgia Tech. Was a tight end. It's just growing and growing season on season. Will McDonald is a guy who has a lot of fancies from Iowa State, a stand-up rusher in a class where there isn't a lot of those kind of flexible speed rushers. There's a lot of power in this class. But between him and BJ Ojolari, who I just checked, is the youngest edge rusher in this class. Myles Murphy is the second youngest. Is another stand-up rusher. I'll let Stu speak about him, seeing as he bowled putting him in his top 5s. But you could go absolutely down the list. Zach Harrison from Ohio State, love him. Derek Hall from Auburn, brilliant. Byron Young from Tennessee. You could just keep going.
Yeah, Will McDonald is one that I really liked. I did an article in the summer about players to watch for the college season. I think he's about the only one who's done anything out of that list, but never mind. We'll gloss over a bit of that. BJ Ojolari, yeah, I wish I had put him in, actually. He's the youngest guy in this class. He wears a number 18 jersey for LSU, which is a big thing there for the guy with the most kind of character, leadership, whatever you want to call it, gets that number 18 jersey. And BJ Ojolari's had that despite his youthful years. He's a really fast, off the edge player who has a really good spin move, but he has a pass rush plan. He really knows what he's doing in that pass rush. He's on the lighter side, and maybe not the strongest guy that you'll see. So the run defense might be a bit of an issue for him. But he is someone who I think is going to start early and do well because he knows what he's doing at the position. His older brother's with MJ's Giants, so he may have a word or two about what he thinks about them as well. But those are a couple of guys for me that I think I want to look at. Byron Young's a really interesting story as well. He was working at a dollar store somewhere and saw a leaflet for JUCO football, decided I'm going to go there, and he's ended up at Tennessee. And he's done so well for coming on that back. He's going to be a bit of an older prospect by the time he gets there, just given the journey he's had. But if you're looking for a player to root for in the journey they've come through, Byron Young, remember Byron Young from Tennessee, not the guy from Alabama, if you get confused with that. Yeah, he's another guy who could be in there. There's probably other ones that MG wants to talk about. There's 3 or 4 I could name on top of what Owain's already said as well.
Yes, so I'm glad you brought it up, Stu, seeing as you brought up the Giants. I want to talk about BJ Ojolari as well, because, Azeez Ojolari is at the Giants. And if pass rush plans are kind of genetic, then, Azeez Ojolari is technically one of the most gifted pass rushers that we've seen at the Giants for a while. He's just had problems staying on the pitch. But BJ Ojolari, again, I think it's one of those things where he's a smaller guy, so he's worked out already. He needs moves. He needs moves to get past people, to exert his authority as a pass rusher. So really like BJ Ojolari. Keon White, which Owen's already mentioned. The only other one was Isaiah Foskey, who I've kept an eye on since he's had 2 11-sack seasons for Notre Dame. And he's a very high character and leadership guy as well. And I'll be interested to see where he goes. But as you said right at the start, there's almost 20 guys there that we could have had a chat about over about a 3 or 4 hour podcast. And it's a really great class.
Another one is, just to mention, is Felix Anudike Uzoma. If you see Daniel Jeremiah's most recent mock draft, he had him going the back end of round 1, and we've not even touched upon him.
Yeah. It's such a good class. Features two of my favourite players in the whole class as well, in Tui Tuipulotu, who I mentioned before, and Nick Herbig from Wisconsin, who's going to be like a designated pass rusher, but his film is very fun to watch.
Lovely stuff. Wow, plenty of names to keep an eye out for there. Thank you very much, guys. Yeah, as I said, get on the Twitter, check out the poll, vote for your your number 2 edge rusher, and check out all the other great stuff we've got on there and on the website at that's the Twitter at 99 yards. The website is 99yards.com. And there we go. That's another episode of the Draft Talk podcast. That's another of our top 5 series. Thank you very much for listening. We'll be back soon. Goodbye.